May 1945. A German general sat in an American prison cell preparing to die. General Johannes Blaskowitz had commanded armies, killed Allied soldiers, and witnessed atrocities he had reported but could not stop. When the cell door opened, he expected execution. What he got was worse. The American officer who entered was not a sergeant with handcuffs. 3 stars gleamed on his collar. Ivory-handled revolvers rode his hips. General George S. Patton, Jr. stopped just inside the threshold and saluted. His hand snapped to his forehead, parade ground perfect, holding it 3 full seconds long enough that every man in that hallway knew it was deliberate. Blaskowitz's breath caught. His mind reeled. A trick. Some final humiliation before the bullet. General Blaskowitz. Patton's voice carried no mockery, no triumph. You will be moved to officer quarters immediately. I have assigned you an aid and bathing facilities. The words made no sense. Blaskowitz had spent 72 hours preparing for execution. He had commanded the 9th Army, held Warsaw, oversaw military districts where thousands died, Jews, partisans, civilians caught in the grinding machinery of occupation. The Americans knew this. They had the documents. Sir, Blaskowitz's voice cracked, I do not understand. Patton lowered his salute. You are a general officer. You will be treated as such until a court determines otherwise. I am your enemy. Blaskowitz needed him to understand. I killed American soldiers. I commanded, you fought for your country, I fought for mine. Patton's jaw tightened. I respect that. Respect? Blaskowitz had been bracing for hatred, for vengeance, for the justice of victors who had seen the camps, the mass graves, the full horror of what Germany became. You honor your enemy? Patton's eyes steel gray, exhausted. Ancient, despite the man's relative youth, held his for a long moment. I honor warriors. Politics is for politicians. He turned to leave, then paused. Your aide will escort you to quarters in 10 minutes. Officer's mess. 1,800 hours. The door closed. The lock did not turn. Blaskowitz stared at the unlocked door, at his trembling hands, at the space where an American general had stood and offered not forgiveness, but something far more devastating. Recognition. Peer to peer. Soldier to soldier. As if the last 6 years of blood and unspeakable darkness could somehow still leave room for honor. As if he still deserved it. The hot water in his new quarters steamed gently. Blaskowitz had not had hot water in months. His Wehrmacht uniform lay in a filthy heap, stripped of insignia 3 days ago by nervous GIs who would not meet his eyes. He stripped and scrubbed methodically, watching dirt and grime swirl down the drain. In the mirror, his body showed the war's cost. 20 pounds thinner, shrapnel scars from 1943, the gray pallor of too many sleepless nights. His hand trembled as he picked up the razor. The blade caught the light. He set it down carefully, precisely. The way an officer does everything. Not yet. Not until he understood what was happening. The civilian clothes his aide delivered fit reasonably well. Gray slacks, white shirt, a jacket. He looked like a professor. Not a general, not a war criminal awaiting judgment. When the aide returned, a young captain with perfect German and a slight Austrian accent, Blaskowitz followed him to the officer's mess with his heart hammering. The dining room was full of uniforms. American, British, French, the Allied command staff. Officers who had spent years fighting Germany. Conversation stopped as Blaskowitz entered. Eyes tracked his movement like artillery finding range. A British colonel, gray-haired chest covered in medals from both wars, stared with naked hatred. Blaskowitz straightened his spine. This I understand. This is honest. Then Patton entered from the opposite door. The room snapped to attention. Patton waved them down with characteristic impatience. Gentlemen, this is General Blaskowitz, formerly of the Wehrmacht 9th Army. He will dine with us tonight. The senior officer's table ran the length of the room. Patton at the head, an empty chair beside him clearly meant for Blaskowitz. Every eye in the room watching as the German walked that long aisle between tables. The British colonel's face went purple. Sir, with respect, this is an outrage. Colonel Hastings. Patton's voice could cut steel. The general is here under military protocol. If you have objections, take them to Eisenhower. Otherwise, you may dine elsewhere. Hastings held Patton's gaze for a long, tense moment, then stood, threw his napkin on the table, and stalked out. The silence was deafening. Anyone else? Patton surveyed the room. No one moved. No one spoke. Good. Patton gestured to the empty chair. General Blazkowicz. Blazkowicz sat on numb legs. An American major passed him a plate, actual food, not rations. Roasted chicken, potatoes, vegetables. The smell made his stomach clench with hunger and nausea in equal measure. Patton carved his chicken with surgical precision. Did not look at Blazkowicz when he spoke. You commanded the 8th Army in Poland. Fall of 1939. It was not a question. Blazkowicz was back there instantly watching the SS follow his troops into Warsaw, documenting atrocities he could not stop, filing reports he knew would be ignored. He set down his fork. Yes, you filed 17 formal complaints about SS actions in occupied territory, mass executions of civilians. You demanded court-martials. The documents. Of course they had the documents. I did. You were ignored by high command and reassigned to France. Patton took a bite of potato, chewed deliberately, swallowed. Most officers did not file any complaints. Most pretended not to see. Blazkowicz's throat was sand dry. I saw, I reported, but I did not do enough. No. Patton's eyes finally met his. You did not. Neither did Rommel. Neither did a dozen other generals who filed reports and kept serving. You want me to say that is forgivable? No, sir. Good. Because it is not. Patton drank from his water glass. You are going to Nuremberg. You will testify about what you saw, what you reported, and what happened anyway. Prosecutors will decide what that makes you witness, accessory, or war criminal. I understand. But until that decision is made, you are a general officer who fought for his country and surrendered with honor. Patton's voice dropped lower, harder. I have fought soldiers, and I have fought fanatics. Soldiers I respect even when I am killing them. Fanatics I put down like rabid dogs. You are a soldier, Blazkowicz, a soldier who served bastards. That does not erase the soldier part. Around them, the dining room had gone silent, everyone listening, pretending not to listen. Blazkowicz stared at his plate, at the food he had not earned, at the casual humanity that felt like a knife twisting in his gut. Why? His voice broke. Why show me this courtesy? Why not just execute me and be done? Patton leaned back. Because if we become monsters to defeat monsters, they have won something even in losing. The Nazis took everything good about German military tradition and twisted it into something obscene. His jaw tightened. Your Iron Cross from the Great War, you think that meant nothing? Your father's service? The warrior's code you were raised to believe in? Hitler destroyed all that, but it existed once. It was real. And we need to remember the difference. He stood. The room stood with him. Finish your dinner, General. Tomorrow you will be transported to the interrogation facility. Tonight you are an officer in custody of the United States Army. Patton walked out. Gradually, conversations resumed. Wary, uncomfortable, but they resumed. Blazkowicz picked up his fork with shaking hands, took a bite of chicken that tasted like ashes and grace and everything he did not deserve. A young American lieutenant sat down across from him, fresh-faced, could not be more than 22. Sir, I am Lieutenant Patterson, part of your escort detail tomorrow. Blazkowicz nodded, waiting for the hatred. My brother died at Aachen, 1st Infantry Division. Here it was. The accusation. Blazkowicz prepared himself. I am sorry for your loss. Yeah, me too. Patterson stared at his plate. General Patton gave us a lecture before you arrived, said you had filed complaints about the SS, said you tried to stop some of what happened and got reassigned for it. That does not absolve. I know. Does not bring my brother back either. Patterson's eyes were hard, but not cruel. But it means something. I do not know what yet, but it means you tried. The lieutenant left. Blazkowicz sat surrounded by enemies who were not treating him like an enemy and felt something inside him crack. Not break, crack. Like ice over deep water, splitting to reveal the darkness beneath. The meal ended. His aide escorted him back to his quarters. Blaskowitz lay on the bed, clean sheets, a pillow, the luxury of a mattress, and stared at the ceiling. Respect, Patton said. The word was a weight crushing his chest, because respect is earned through honor, and Blaskowitz knew with terrible clarity that whatever honor he once had was forfeit the moment he continued serving after those reports were ignored. But Patton gave it to him anyway. Not forgiveness, not absolution. Recognition that he was once something before the Reich twisted it into darkness. It was more devastating than any execution could be. On the desk, his razor gleamed in the moonlight. Not yet. First, testimony. 3 weeks later, an American military prosecutor sat across from Blaskowitz in a bare interrogation room. Lieutenant Colonel Warren was 40, balding, with exhausted eyes that had read too many atrocity reports. Let us go through the timeline again, General. October 1939. Your first complaint about SS executions in the Warsaw District. Yes, Blaskowitz had repeated this 17 times already, each interrogation chipping away another layer. I documented mass shootings of civilians. I requested military tribunals. Who received these reports? General von Brauchitsch, Army High Command. Response? Verbal acknowledgement. No action. The words were catechism now. November 2nd. Complaint with more evidence. Warren slid a document across the table. This one? Blaskowitz looked at his own handwriting from 5.5 years ago. Careful military language. Professional distance while describing murder. The attitude of the troops towards the SS alternates between disgust and hatred. Every soldier feels sickened and repelled by these crimes committed in Poland by members of the Reich. He had believed that mattered. That documenting disgust was resistance. No response to the second complaint, he continued mechanically. January 1943 complaint directly to General Keitel at OKW. And relieved of command in May. Reassigned to occupation duties in France. Warren made notes. You are aware your reports reached Hitler himself? I learned that after the war. Blaskowitz's voice was flat. I learned many things after. Did you consider resigning? The question was a lance through his chest. Every day, Colonel. Every single day. But you did not. No. Why? Blaskowitz had asked himself this 10,000 times in his cell at night during interrogations, watching Germany's ruins slide past truck windows. I told myself a soldier does not abandon his post, that Germany needed good officers to counterbalance the madness, that I could do more good inside than outside. He met Warren's eyes. I told myself many things. None were true. The truth is, I was a coward. I chose my career and my conception of duty over doing what was right. Warren's pen stopped moving. That is quite an admission. It is the only admission that matters. The interrogation continued for another 2 hours. Documents, dates, chain of command structures. Who knew what? When did they know it? What actions were taken or not taken? Warren's voice pulled him back to the interrogation room. You will be called as a witness when trials begin. The prosecution wants your testimony about Wehrmacht SS separation, how military leadership handled atrocity reports. I will testify to everything I know, even if it incriminates you, especially then. Warren almost smiled. General Patton said you would say that. He thinks you are one of the few who actually understands accountability. The mention of Patton sent complicated emotion through Blaskowitz's chest. He had not seen the American general since that first dinner, but the man's presence followed him like a ghost. General Patton treats honor like it is something absolute, Blaskowitz said quietly. Like it can exist even in men who have failed at it. Maybe it can. Warren headed for the door. Tomorrow you will be moved to the main detention complex. You will be housed with other senior officers awaiting trial, some defendants, some witnesses. Guards are instructed to maintain proper protocols. After Warren left, Blaskowitz sat alone in the interrogation room. A guard waited by the door with professional patience. Proper protocols. The Americans maintained them throughout. Not kindness exactly. Blaskowitz had no illusions about his status, but correct treatment. Military, the way Patton saluted him that first day, acknowledging the rank even while holding him prisoner. It would be easier if they treated him like a monster. Beat him, starved him, screamed accusations. He could accept that, settle into the villain role, and accept punishment with resignation. But this careful, devastating respect, it forced him to remain human, to stay inside the recognition that he was once an officer who believed in honor, and that made his failures so much heavier. His new cellmate at the detention complex was another general awaiting trial, another man with documents showing he had witnessed atrocities, filed reports, kept serving anyway. They did not speak the first night, just lay in narrow beds staring at opposite walls, wrapped in private guilt. On the second day, his cellmate broke the silence. "They are calling us witnesses, not defendants. Think that means something?" Blaskowitz thought of Patton's words. "Soldiers, I respect. Fanatics, I put down like rabid dogs. I think there is a difference," he said slowly, "between believing in what was done and just allowing it, because standing against it was too hard. And which are we? I do not know. I honestly do not know." Over the following days, a strange routine developed. Morning roll call by American guards who maintained perfect military courtesy. Breakfast where German generals ate the same rations as Allied soldiers. Interrogations conducted by prosecutors who never tortured, never threatened, just documented. Evenings, prisoners socialized in a common room, a surreal existence. Generals who had commanded armies now playing chess while awaiting trials that could end in execution. One evening, a heated argument erupted. A newcomer, a colonel, early 40s, was vibrating with rage about their treatment. Blaskowitz looked up from his soup. "Would you prefer they beat you? I would prefer they be honest about what this is. They hate us. They should act like it. They are acting like soldiers," his cellmate said quietly. "Which is more than we deserve." The colonel's face went red. "We fought for Germany. We did our duty." "Did you?" The words came out harder than Blaskowitz intended. "Did you file reports when you saw civilians murdered? Did you object when the SS rounded up Jews in your sector? Or did you tell yourself it was not your responsibility? Soldiers do not question orders, you were just doing your duty." The common room went silent. The colonel stood, fists clenched. "You dare judge me? Thousands died in territories under your authority." "Yes." Blaskowitz stood too. His voice dropped to something quiet and deadly. "They did, and I filed reports. When those reports were ignored, I continued to serve. I told myself I was being a good German officer. I was wrong. And the Americans treating me with military courtesy instead of beating me only makes that wrongness sharper. You are a traitor to Germany. Germany died when we allowed honor to be sacrificed for loyalty to a madman. These Americans, they are showing us what we lost, what we were supposed to be and failed at being." The colonel stormed out. But Blaskowitz felt eyes on him, assessing, considering. A young American guard approached with coffee. "Sir?" General Patton called. "Asked to be updated on your status." "Why would he care?" The guard shrugged. "Above my pay grade, sir, but he calls every few days. Wants to know you are being treated properly." After the guard left, his cellmate leaned close. "They are teaching us something, are they not?" "What?" "That honor exists even when everything else has failed. That you can respect your enemy and still hold him accountable." He struggled for words. "That maybe we were not entirely wrong to believe in the warrior's code. We just served the wrong cause." Blaskowitz thought of Patton's salute, of the aide's patient courtesy, of Lieutenant Patterson, whose brother died at Aachen, who could have spit in his face but instead said, "It means something that you tried." "I think they are teaching us that honor is a choice," Blaskowitz said slowly. "Every day, every moment, you choose it or you do not. We told ourselves we did not have a choice. We had to serve, follow orders, maintain discipline even when discipline meant enabling atrocity." He looked at his hands. "But we did have a choice. We just did not make it. And now we testify. We tell the truth. We accept whatever judgment comes." Blazkowicz met his cellmate's eyes. Not because it absolves us, but because it is the only honorable thing left to do. That night, lying in his bunk, Blazkowicz composed a letter to his daughter Maria. He had been avoiding it for weeks. How do you tell your child that everything she believed about you is a lie? But Patton's words echoed, "We need to remember the difference." He wrote through the night, crossing out lines, starting over, telling her about the reports he had filed, the orders he had followed anyway. The Americans treating him with respect he did not deserve, and what that respect was, teaching him about the difference between honor and loyalty. You asked me once what it means to be a soldier. I told you it means service to your country. I was wrong. It means service to what is right, even when your country demands otherwise, especially then. I failed that test, Maria. These Americans are showing me what I should have been. He did not know if he would be able to send it. Did not know if she would ever forgive him. But he wrote it anyway. Because testimony is not just for courts, it is for the people who believed in you and deserve to know how you failed them. On the desk, his razor caught the lamplight. He looked at it for a long moment, then turned back to the letter. Not yet. November 1945. The Nuremberg trials began. February 1946. Johannes Blazkowicz was called as a witness. He walked into the courtroom in civilian clothes, the same gray suit his aide had given him 9 months ago. The defendant sat in 2 rows, Goering in front, still defiant, Keitel staring at his hands, Jodel's face a mask. Men who gave the orders, who built the machinery of death. Blazkowicz was not sitting with them. He stood at the witness stand, under oath to tell the truth. The chief prosecutor was Robert Jackson, American. His questions were precise, devastating. General Blazkowicz, describe your first complaint regarding SS activities in occupied Poland. Blazkowicz described it. The mass graves, the shootings, the systematic murder disguised as security operations. His voice steady, eyes forward, reciting facts that damned everyone in the room, including himself. And the response? No meaningful response, sir. I was eventually relieved of command. Yet you continued to serve the Wehrmacht for 5 more years. Yes. Why? The courtroom was silent. Newsreel cameras whirred. Blazkowicz looked at the defendants, some defiant, some broken, all guilty. I told myself I was doing my duty, that a soldier serves regardless of politics, that I could be more effective working within the system. He paused. I was wrong on all counts. The truth is, I was afraid. Afraid of what resigning would cost me. Afraid of being labeled a traitor. Afraid of losing my career, my honor, my self-conception as a good officer serving Germany. And now? What do you believe now? I believe honor is meaningless if it is conditional. I believe duty to country is subordinate to duty to humanity. I believe, his voice cracked, I believe I failed every test that mattered, and that thousands who died in territories under my authority died in part because I chose comfort over courage. The testimony continued for 4 hours. Documents, dates, the careful architecture of genocide, and the military officers who witnessed it and did nothing or too little. When it ended, Jackson had one final question. General Blazkowicz, you were treated with military courtesy by General Patton when you surrendered. Why do you think he did that? Blazkowicz looked at the defendants, at the judges, at the cameras, recording this for history. Because General Patton understood something we forgot, that the warrior's code exists independent of the cause you serve, that you can respect your enemy's courage and still hold him accountable for his crimes. That honor is not about loyalty to a nation or a leader. It is about loyalty to principles that transcend both. He took a breath. He treated me with respect to teach me what respect actually means, and to show that even in defeating us, the Allies remain different from what we became. The courtroom erupted. Spectators shouting. Defendants screaming denials. The judges calling for order. Blazkowicz was escorted out by American military police, back to his cell, back to waiting. In May 1946, he received a letter, American postmark, no return address. Inside, a single sheet in precise handwriting. General Blazkowicz, I read your testimony. You told the truth even when it condemned you. That is more than most men manage. You asked me once why I treated you with respect. The answer is simple. Because the moment we stop seeing our enemies as human beings capable of honor, we become what we are fighting against. You failed your tests during the war, but you are passing them now. That counts for something. George S. Patton Jr. Blaskowitz read it 3 times, folded it carefully, placed it in his pocket next to his father's Iron Cross. The trials continued through summer and fall. Blaskowitz testified twice more, once about military chain of command, once about Wehrmacht SS separation. Each time he told the truth without mitigation, without excuse. September 1946. Verdicts came down. Göring, death by hanging. Keitel, death by hanging. Jodl, death by hanging. In November, the prosecutors met with Blaskowitz. "We are not charging you," Warren said. "Your testimony was invaluable. Your documented complaints show Wehrmacht awareness and complicity, but also resistance. You are being released to custody of the occupation government pending further investigation. I should be charged." The words came out flat, certain. "I commanded those territories. I failed to stop what happened." "That is not my decision, General. The tribunal has ruled." Blaskowitz was transferred to a different facility, less prison, more administrative detention. He was given work cataloging Wehrmacht documents, translating reports, building the historical record of how Germany's military became complicit in genocide. It was during this work that he found the documents detailing what happened to the people and territories he once commanded. Numbers, names when available, dates of deportation, of execution, of death in camps he had heard whispers about but never truly believed could exist at such scale. His third complaint from Poland, the one sent to Keitel, was there in the files, with a handwritten note in the margin, "General Blaskowitz is to be watched. Potential unreliability regarding racial policy." They knew. Everyone knew. And they did it anyway. And he kept serving anyway. On his desk, his father's razor gleamed. He picked it up, felt its weight, set it down, picked up his pen instead, started another letter to Maria. The letters accumulated over months. Blaskowitz wrote to Maria every week. She wrote back in March 1947, careful, measured, not the girl's voice he remembered. "Papa, I received your letters. I do not know what to say. I am angry. I am heartbroken. But I am also proud that you are telling the truth now. Mother says I should not write. That you have shamed the family." But silence is what enabled all of this. He read it 17 times. In May 1947, Patton's widow wrote to him. General Patton had died in December 1945, a car accident in occupied Germany, never knowing how his story with Blaskowitz would end. Mrs. Beatrice Patton's letter was brief. "My husband spoke of you several times before his death. He believed you represented something important, that good men could serve evil causes, and that recognizing their humanity did not mean excusing their failures. He wanted you to know that honor is something you can lose and work toward regaining, even if you never fully reclaim it. He believed you were doing that work. I hope you continue." Blaskowitz kept that letter with Patton's earlier one, 2 pieces of paper, 2 attempts to show him something about who he could have been, who he still might become in whatever time remained. The work continued. Documents, testimony, building the historical record. At night, he stared at his father's razor. The weight was growing heavier. In September 1947, Warren visited him at the document facility. There was talk of additional trials, smaller cases, command responsibility for specific atrocities. Your name keeps coming up. As defendant, as witness, maybe defendant. The evidence is complicated. You filed complaints, but you also signed administrative orders that enabled SS operations in your districts. You did not order the killings, but you provided the infrastructure that made them possible. So I am guilty. Legally, that is for courts to decide. Morally, Warren shrugged. I am a prosecutor, not a priest. But I will tell you this, most of the officers we are investigating did not file any complaints, did not document anything, just pretended not to see. That has to count for something. Does it? I do not know, General. I honestly do not know. After Warren left, Blaskowitz sat in his small office surrounded by documents detailing the machinery of genocide. His hands trembled as he read through another report, this one from his own district in Poland, 1939. An SS operation in a village he had never visited, 140 civilians executed for suspected partisan activity. His signature was on the transportation authorization, the Wehrmacht trucks that carried the SS to that village. He had not known what they were going to do, but he could have asked, should have asked, could have refused, did not. That night he wrote to Maria telling her about the new testimony request, about command responsibility, about the difference between ordering atrocities and enabling them. Her response arrived 3 days later. Papa, you have testified. You have told the truth. Stop torturing yourself. Come home when they release you. We will figure out how to live with what happened. Together. He placed it carefully in his desk drawer next to Patton's letters, his father's iron cross, and the razor. Looked at all 4 items. Made his choice. February 5th, 1948. Johannes Blaskowitz woke before dawn in his quarters at the document facility. He had been awake most of the night, really lying in bed, watching darkness give way to gray pre-dawn light through his window. He rose, dressed with the same meticulous care he had brought to 40 years of military service, wrote 3 letters, one to Maria, one to Warren, one to Mrs. Beatrice Patton. Then he walked to the bathroom, carrying his father's razor. The blade was sharp. His hand was steady. The cut was clean. They found him an hour later. The letter to Maria was delivered unopened, per his instructions. Its contents remained private. Maria would never share them publicly, carrying her father's final words as a burden too heavy for the world to bear. But years later, she would tell an interviewer, he said he could not live with what he had allowed to happen. That being treated with honor when he did not deserve, it was harder than any punishment. That he hoped his testimony would help ensure no soldier ever again mistakes obedience for honor, and that he was grateful the Americans, especially General Patton, had shown him what he had lost, shown him the difference between who he was and who he should have been. He said that recognition was the greatest gift and the greatest curse they could have given him. The funeral was small, American military chaplain, a few Wehrmacht officers who had testified at Nuremberg. His aide attended the young captain with the Austrian accent, now a major, older, carrying the weight of too many stories like this one. No German military honors. At Blaskowitz's written request, his father's Iron Cross was buried with him. The warrior's code of an older Germany laid to rest with the man who had tried to uphold it in an era when it meant nothing. In his final diary entry found among his papers, Blaskowitz had written, Patton was right about everything. He said politics is for politicians, but that is where I was wrong all along. Honor is not separate from politics. When politics becomes evil, honor demands you resist, even at cost of duty, career, life itself. I learned this too late, from an enemy who showed me more respect than I showed the innocent people who died while I filed reports and followed orders. The salute he gave me in that cell was more devastating than any bullet, because it recognized what I once was, what I could have been, what I failed to be, and I have to live with that recognition every moment of every day, or rather, I do not. This is my final choice, the one I should have made in 1939 when the first reports were ignored. Not surrender, not service, but accountability on my own terms. George S. Patton had died in December 1945, long before Blaskowitz's testimony, before the suicide, before any of it concluded. But his letter to Maria, written in October 1945, was found among Blaskowitz's papers after his death. Maria had sent it to him, and he had kept it. I treated your father with respect because he was a soldier who tried to do the right thing in circumstances that made the right thing nearly impossible. He failed, but his failure was human, not monstrous. The monsters were the men who gave the orders and built the death camps. Your father was a good man who served an evil cause. That does not excuse him, but it means something that he tried to fight it, even weakly. In war, we need to remember the difference between the monster and the man who could not stop the monster. Both are guilty, but they are not the same. Maria kept that letter for the rest of her life, showed it to her children, her grandchildren. A reminder that honor is complicated, that complicity and resistance can exist in the same person, that the world is rarely divided cleanly into heroes and villains, that sometimes the most devastating thing an enemy can do is treat you with the respect you failed to earn, and that testimony speaking truth, even when it condemns you, is the only path back toward whatever honor might remain when everything else has turned to ash. Today, military historians debate Johannes Blaskowitz's legacy. Some call him a resistor, citing his 17 formal complaints against SS atrocities, more than any other Wehrmacht general filed. Others call him complicit, noting he continued to serve for 5 years after those complaints were ignored, providing administrative support that enabled genocide even if he did not order it directly. The truth is probably both. He was a man who believed in an ideal of military honor that did not survive contact with totalitarian evil, who tried to fight within the system and learned too late that some systems cannot be fought from within, who received respect from his enemies that taught him how far he had fallen from what he once believed himself to be. The meeting between Patton and Blaskowitz lasted less than 10 minutes. A salute, a few words, a choice to treat a captured enemy as a fellow soldier rather than simply a monster. But sometimes 10 minutes of recognition can be more devastating than any punishment. Sometimes being shown who you were supposed to be is heavier than any sentence a court could impose. In the end, General Patton taught Blaskowitz the cruelest lesson of all, that being treated with the honor you once had is more devastating than any punishment when you know you have lost it forever. The salute that saved his dignity destroyed his soul. And perhaps that was the point all along, that real accountability is not about punishment, it is about recognition, about being forced to see who you were, who you became, and living with the difference. Or in Blaskowitz's case, not living with it. 3 years after that salute in the prison cell, in a bathroom in occupied Germany, Johannes Blaskowitz made his final choice, the one he should have made in 1939 when the first reports were ignored. Not surrender, not continued service, but accountability on his own terms. And sometimes the greatest act of resistance is simply telling the truth, especially when the truth offers no redemption. Just testimony, just record, just the acknowledgement that you saw, and you failed, and you are sorry, and that sorry will never, ever be enough. But you say it anyway, because that is what honor actually means. Thanks for watching. I hope this dignified moment from history reminded you of humanity, even in war. Do not forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true historical stories. The cockpit is screaming. Hannah Reich, Nazi Germany's most decorated test pilot, survivor of 43 crashes, 0 apologies given, has 15 seconds before the experimental jet becomes her 44th. Metal tears from metal as the XF-92A's left wing folds backward at 200 miles per hour. Her hands move across controls that no longer respond, her body pressed into the seat by G-forces that turn her vision gray at the edges. Through the fracturing canopy, she sees California desert spinning sky, ground, and her mind calculates with the cold precision of someone who has done this before. This is number 44. She knows exactly what the American engineers in the observation tower are thinking. They are watching her die. She has known it since the moment 6 months ago when Colonel Patterson slid the contract across his desk and said, "We need someone who understands what it means to push past the edge." A German, a former Nazi, someone whose death would not matter to American mothers reading their morning newspapers. One are trying to catch her. Her thumb hovers over the ejection handle American innovation, this seat that might save her, but 43 crashes have taught her something these Americans do not yet understand. Sometimes staying with the aircraft gives you more control than abandoning it. But why did they really hire me? The impact comes at 140 miles per hour. She does not know it yet, but in 48 hours, Colonel Patterson will show her a document that destroys everything she believes about her brother's death. Back in California, medics are cutting her from the wreckage. But to understand why Hannah signed that American contract, you need to know what happened 15 months earlier. Berlin, April 1945. The Reich has 12 days left to live, but nobody has told Hannah yet. She stood in the rubble of Tempelhof Airport and watched Soviet artillery make the eastern horizon pulse orange every few seconds, a heartbeat of incoming apocalypse. Around her, Luftwaffe mechanics were burning documents, smashing instruments, shooting horses that could not be evacuated. She was 33 years old and had survived crashes that killed men twice her size. Her service record read like a medical impossibility: fractured skull testing the Me-163 rocket plane, shattered jaw in a glider crash, broken vertebrae, ruptured spleen. The Reich's propaganda machine had loved her, the petite blonde woman who embodied Aryan perfection and industrial courage, who had tested every experimental aircraft the Luftwaffe could design. She had believed what they told her about the enemies. Her father had shown her the photographs passed around in hushed tones. Soviet atrocities in East Prussia, American bombing raids targeting civilians. "They want to reduce us to medieval peasants," he had said, his hand trembling. "The Americans smile and call it democracy, but they will turn our cities into graveyards." She had watched newsreels of captured German soldiers in American camps. Faces hollow, uniforms torn. "This is their mercy," the narrator intoned. "Slow starvation disguised as prisoner of war convention." Hannah had one personal reason to fear Americans more than most. Her younger brother, Kurt, Luftwaffe navigator, shot down over France in 1944, captured by American forces. For 6 months, nothing, no letters, no word through neutral channels. Then a notification. Kurt had died in an American POW camp. Pneumonia, they claimed. Her mother collapsed when the telegram arrived. Her father turned silent, retreating into his study with a bottle of schnapps that never seemed to empty. They let him die, Hannah thought. They had medicine, food, warm buildings. They let him die anyway. Back in the California desert, Hannah regains consciousness in the medical tent. Her ribs ache, her hands are shaking, but nothing is broken. She has survived 44 crashes. The Americans do not know this yet, but she has one condition for accepting their help. They tell her the truth about Kurt. So when the Soviets closed the ring around Berlin and Admiral Donitz ordered final evacuations, Hannah did not wait for official transport. She took a Fieseler Storch, a tiny reconnaissance plane, and flew west through the Soviet cordon, skimming so low over the Elbe that Russian machine gunners could not depress their weapons fast enough. She landed in American-occupied Bavaria 3 hours later. The GI who pulled her from the cockpit looked about 19 years old, with freckles across his sunburned nose and a Midwest accent that turned every word into something friendly and dangerous at once. "Ma'am, you are going to need to come with us." Hannah raised her hands. She had prepared herself for this moment, rehearsed this surrender 100 times in her mind. The interrogations, the camps, the justice that victors dispensed to the defeated. She thought of Kurt dying alone in an American compound somewhere in France. She wondered if she would see spring again. The interrogation room at the American intelligence facility in Heidelberg had windows. Real windows, actual glass with sunlight streaming through, illuminating a wooden table that looked like it belonged in someone's dining room. No chains bolted to walls, no bloodstains, no tools arranged on a tray to extract information through pain. Just windows, a table, and 2 chairs. This is the trick, Hannah thought. Make you comfortable. Make you talk. The American officer who entered did not match propaganda descriptions either. Colonel Patterson was maybe 45, with gray threading through his dark hair and reading glasses perched on his nose. He carried a folder thick with papers and a thermos that smelled like coffee. Real coffee. Not acorn bark. Not roasted grain. Real coffee. From a country she had been taught to hate. "Miss Reich," he said, sitting across from her. Can I offer you some? She stared at the thermos. Her hands, still bruised from her last crash landing, remained clasped in her lap. I do not need your charity. Patterson poured himself a cup, the steam curling up between them. It is not charity. It is coffee. And you look like you have not eaten properly in weeks. He is establishing dominance, Hannah reasoned, showing me what he has and I do not. Where is the rest of your team? The ones who do the actual questioning? Patterson pulled out a document from his folder. Her Luftwaffe service record, complete with technical evaluations, crash reports, medical assessments. He read through it slowly, his eyebrows rising as he turned pages. You have tested everything. The Me-163, the Phi-156, the Do-335, experimental helicopter designs, rocket-assisted gliders. He looked up. You crashed a Focke-Wulf 61 helicopter during an indoor demonstration and walked away with a fractured spine. Your point? My point is that you are possibly the most experienced test pilot alive. You understand flight physics, structural stress, and human endurance under G-forces better than anyone I have ever read about. Hannah felt something cold settle in her stomach. This was not interrogation, this was assessment. The war is over, Miss Reich. Your side lost. But the technology race? That is just beginning. He opened another folder containing photographs of American aircraft, swept-wing designs, jet engines, concepts that look like science fiction. We are developing planes that fly faster than sound. We are testing control surfaces that do not work like anything that has come before. And we are losing pilots. Good. The word came out harder than she intended. Patterson did not react. Instead, he opened the folder slowly like a man who had rehearsed this moment and still dreaded it. He slid a document across the table. German text. Official letterhead. Hannah's breath stopped. Your brother, Patterson said quietly. Kurt Reich. Her hands gripped the table edge. He died in our custody. January 3rd, 1945. Patterson's voice dropped. I am going to tell you exactly what happened. And I need you to believe me, because if you do not, this conversation ends and you spend the next 3 years in a displaced persons camp. The room tilted. Hannah forced herself to breathe. Kurt was part of a group of prisoners being transported when their train was strafed by RAF fighters, not Americans, the British. The train derailed. Kurt and 17 other POWs were trapped in a boxcar that caught fire. Patterson pushed forward another document, medical reports, handwritten notes in English. American medics pulled him out. He had inhaled too much smoke. His lungs were destroyed. The field hospital did everything they could. I have the reports here. Doctors Zimmerman and Cole worked on him for 6 hours. They used penicillin, rationed penicillin, that was supposed to go to our own wounded because they thought they could save him. Lies. They are lying. But the medical reports were not forgeries. She had seen enough Luftwaffe documentation to recognize authentic paperwork, timestamp entries showing overnight observation. A final note. Patient expired 0340 hours. Dr. Cole present. Death certificate issued. Why are you showing me this? Her voice cracked. Because I need you to understand something before I make you an offer. Patterson leaned forward. Your propaganda told you we let prisoners die, that we do not value German lives. But here is what actually happened. American doctors tried to save your brother's life using medicine that could have saved American soldiers instead. They failed, and I am sorry. Hannah stared at the papers, at the impossible details that only truth contained, the specific times, the doctors' names, the medical terminology that could not be fabricated by someone trying to manipulate her. She thought of her father in his study, bottle in hand, believing the telegram that said nothing except pneumonia and a date. Kurt did not die from neglect, Patterson said. He died from an accident during transport, and American medics tried everything to save him. That is the truth, not the comfortable lie your government told you. The silence stretched between them. Finally, Patterson slid one more document across the table. A contract, American government letterhead, salary figures that made her vision blur. I am offering you a job, Miss Reich, testing experimental aircraft for the United States Air Force. You will work at Muroc Dry Lake in California. You will fly prototypes no one has ever flown before. You will probably crash. But you will be paid, housed, and treated like any other test pilot on the program. You are hiring a Nazi, she said. No, I am hiring a test pilot. What you believed, what you fought for, that is history now. What matters is what you can do going forward. This is a trick. It has to be a trick. But the medical reports were not forgeries. And the details about Kurt, the timeline, the location, the specific injuries, those were not things that could be fabricated. Why me? She asked. Because American pilots have not crashed 43 times and lived. American pilots do not understand what it means to fly something that is trying to kill you. Patterson picked up the thermos again, poured a second cup, and pushed it toward her. You are not disposable to me, Miss Reich. You are valuable, irreplaceable, actually. Hannah reached for the coffee cup. Her hand trembled slightly, and she hated herself for it. The coffee was real, strong and bitter and hot, the first real coffee she had tasted since 1943. She drank it slowly, feeling warmth spread through her chest, and thought about Kurt in that burning boxcar, American doctors fighting to save him while their own wounded waited. I will need to think about it, she said. Patterson nodded. You have 24 hours. But they both knew she had already decided. Muroc Dry Lake, California. September 1946. The desert heat hit like a physical force when Hannah stepped off the transport plane. Heat waves made the distant mountains shimmer, and the lake bed stretched out white and endless, a perfect natural runway for aircraft that might not survive a traditional landing. The American test pilots watched her arrival with expressions ranging from curiosity to open hostility. That is her, one muttered, loud enough to be heard. The Nazi ace? Test pilot, another corrected. There is a difference. Not sure there is, Jim. Hannah kept her expression neutral and her posture correct. She had learned in Berlin how to move through hostile spaces, chin up, shoulders back, never show uncertainty. The same skills that helped her navigate Reich party functions now helped her cross a California runway under the eyes of men who had fought against her country. Colonel Patterson met her at the hangar entrance. Welcome to Muroc. Your quarters are in Building 7. Tomorrow, basic orientation. The day after, you will fly your first evaluation run. What aircraft? Patterson smiled slightly. The one that killed our last test pilot. The XF-92A looked like someone had started building a fighter jet and then decided mathematics mattered more than pilot survival. Swept wings angled back at 40 degrees. A bubble canopy that provided excellent visibility but zero protection if the structural frame failed. Control surfaces that responded to input about 3 seconds after the pilot expected them to. She is based on German research, the chief engineer explained. Morrison was older than most pilots, maybe 50, with oil-stained hands and the patient tone of someone who had explained aircraft physics thousands of times. Your aerodynamicist figured out swept-wing theory but never got to test it properly. We are trying to validate the math. And the last pilot? Hannah asked. Morrison's expression darkened. Captain Reynolds. Good pilot, great pilot. He pushed the envelope on the third test flight, tried a 7G turn at Mach 0.85. The airframe could not handle it. Wings separated. He did not get out. Hannah studied the aircraft specs, memorizing load factors and stress limits, calculating where Reynolds had gone wrong. The other pilots avoided her for the first 3 weeks. The mess hall went quiet when she entered. Not silent, just quieter. Conversations continued at nearby tables, but no one made eye contact. No one gestured to the empty chair beside them. Hannah took her tray to the corner table, the one by the window where afternoon sun made reading technical manuals possible. She had eaten alone in worse places. It was Jim Chen, a Chinese-American pilot from Seattle, who broke the ice. He sat down across from her in the mess hall on a Tuesday evening, his tray clattering onto the table with deliberate noise. You flew the Me-163, he said. Not a question. A statement. Hannah looked up from her dinner. Yes. Rocket-powered interceptor. Climbs at 30,000 feet per minute. Fuel that dissolves human flesh if it touches you. Landing gear that detaches on takeoff. That is accurate. Jim leaned forward. I read the technical reports. That thing killed more Luftwaffe pilots than Allied bombers did. You tested it anyway. You crashed it twice and survived both times. How? Hannah set down her fork. This was the first time any American pilot had asked her a question that was not hostile. The Me-163 did not want to kill you. It just did not care if you lived. There is a difference. If you understood that, if you stopped fighting the aircraft and started working with its limitations, you could survive. Most pilots tried to fly it like a normal fighter. That is what killed them. Jim nodded slowly. The XF-92A is the same way. It is not trying to kill us. It just operates on principles that do not match pilot intuition. Exactly. So how do we stop losing pilots to it? And just like that, they were colleagues. 3 months into the program, Hannah crashed the XF-92A. It happened during a high-speed stability test at 35,000 feet. The mission brief called for a series of banking turns at progressive speeds, mapping control response, measuring structural stress, pushing toward the edge of the flight envelope. The left aileron simply stopped functioning at Mach 0.78. No warning, no flutter or degradation. One moment it worked, the next moment it was dead weight. The aircraft rolled inverted. Hannah's hands moved automatically, decades of muscle memory translating panic into procedure. She yanked the stick, trying to counter the roll. Nothing. The XF-92A continued rotating, picking up spin momentum, the horizon wheeling past the canopy in a blur of sky ground. Altitude, 34,000 feet. Her training kicked in, not Luftwaffe training, but the deeper instinct purchased with 43 previous crashes. She stopped fighting the spin, centered the stick, let the aircraft stabilize in its rotation. Altitude, 31,000 feet. The spin rate began to equalize. She could feel it through the seat, through the control surfaces that still responded. The aircraft wanted to spin fine. Let it spin, but control the spin direction. Use differential throttle. Use the working aileron. Use rudder input to gradually, incrementally, reduce the rotation rate. Altitude, 27,000 feet. The desert floor resolved into details now. Roads, buildings, the white expanse of the lakebed. Altitude, 23,000 feet. She had the spin under control, barely. The rotation slowed from 12 revolutions per minute to 8, then 6, then 4. She began feeding an opposite aileron pressure, gentle, testing, feeling for the edge where control became catastrophe. Altitude, 19,000 feet. The spin broke. The XF-92A dropped out of rotation and into a steep dive, the nose pointing almost vertically downward. Hannah pulled back on the stick too hard and the wings would separate, too soft, and she would auger into the desert, finding that perfect middle pressure that let the aircraft transition from falling to flying. Altitude, 12,000 feet. The nose came up, the wings bit into the air, the XF-92A leveled out at 8,000 feet, still flying, still controllable. Hannah aimed for the lake bed. The landing gear deployed, she could feel the mechanical thunk through the airframe, but the left strut felt wrong. The hydraulics compromised. She came in fast, too fast, trading altitude for speed because the damaged aileron made slow flight impossible. The lake bed rushed up. The wheels touched. The left landing gear collapsed immediately. The XF-92, a slewed sideways, throwing up a rooster tail of white dust 50 feet high. Metal scraped across packed earth. The right wing dug in, pivoting the aircraft in a slow, grinding circle. Components tore away the canopy seal, the belly panels, pieces of wing structure. Hannah rode it out, hands locked on the stick, keeping the aircraft as level as possible, while physics and friction did their work. The XF-92A ground to a stop 1,500 feet from initial touchdown. Hannah sat in the cockpit for a moment, checking her body for injuries. Everything worked. No broken bones, no internal damage. Her hands were shaking adrenaline. Not fear, but that would pass. She had survived 44 crashes. The emergency crews surrounded the aircraft within minutes, fire extinguishers ready, medics rushing forward. Colonel Patterson was the first person to reach the cockpit. "Are you hurt?" he demanded. "No." Hannah unstrapped, testing her legs. "The aileron control rod sheared. Mechanical failure, not design flaw. The backup systems worked as intended." Patterson stared at her. "You just survived an unrecoverable spin from 35,000 feet. It was recoverable. It just required unconventional technique." The other pilots arrived minutes later. Jim Chen looked at the destroyed landing gear, the scarred fuselage, the smoking engine housing, and started laughing. Not mockery, genuine, amazed laughter. "She crashed it," he said to the others. "She actually crashed it and walked away." "Someone get this on film," another pilot called. "No one is going to believe it otherwise." That night, in the mess hall, the American pilots made space for her at their usual table. Not reluctantly, not with forced politeness. They simply moved over and expected her to sit down. "Tell us about the helicopter crash," Jim said. "The one where you fractured your spine during an indoor demonstration." Hannah looked around the table, at faces that were interested, respectful, genuinely curious, at men who had fought against Germany and were now asking her to teach them. She told them about the Focke-Wulf 61, about the crowded exhibition hall, about the moment the rotor caught the ceiling and the helicopter dropped like a stone. She told them about hitting the floor, about feeling her third lumbar vertebra compress, about forcing herself to stand anyway because thousands of people were watching and she could not show weakness. "That is insane," one of the younger pilots said. "That is test piloting. You do not stop because it hurts. You stop when you cannot learn anything more." The Americans nodded, understanding in a way that civilians never could. 1 month later, Hannah defended the XF-92A program before Pentagon observers. A general from Washington had reviewed the crash reports and recommended program cancellation. "Too dangerous," he argued. "Too expensive. Too many pilots lost for too little gain." "With respect, sir," Hannah interrupted, "you are wrong." The room went silent. A German test pilot, a former Nazi, had just contradicted an American general. Patterson started to intervene, but the general raised a hand. "Explain." Hannah stood, walked to the technical drawings on the wall. "This configuration is the future of high-speed flight. Your aerodynamicists know it. Your engineers know it. The only question is whether you will perfect it before the Soviets do." "At what cost?" the general demanded. "How many more pilots do we lose?" "None. If you listen to someone who has crashed 44 times and can tell you exactly what each one taught me." Hannah traced the wing structure with her finger. "Captain Reynolds died because he pushed the aircraft past its current limitations, not because the design is flawed, but because we did not yet understand where those limitations were. Every crash maps the boundary between possible and impossible. That is not waste. That is progress." The general studied her. "You are asking me to continue a program that could kill you. I am telling you that if you stop now, everything we have learned, everything Reynolds died teaching us becomes meaningless. The Soviets will not stop their research. They will develop swept-wing aircraft while you are playing it safe. And when they do, you will wish you had listened to the test pilot who told you how to win." The room stayed silent for a long moment. Then the general smiled. "The program continues. But, Miss Reich, if you die testing my aircraft, I am going to be very irritated with you." "Understood, sir." Hannah Reich tested 15 experimental aircraft for the United States Air Force between 1946 and 1952. She crashed 7 of them and walked away from every single impact. The XF-92A program became the foundation for the Phone 102 Delta Dagger and ultimately the Phone 106 Delta Dart interceptors that defended American airspace throughout the Cold War. The lessons Hannah taught about swept-wing behavior, about control surface response at high speeds, about pilot technique in aircraft that defied traditional flying instincts, those lessons saved lives. But the most important lesson could not be written in a technical manual. In 1952, after 6 years at Muroc, Hannah requested leave. She flew back to Germany, West Germany now, rebuilt with American aid, streets filled with new construction where rubble had been. Her father met her at the Frankfurt airport. He was older, grayer, more bent than she remembered. They had not spoken since she had taken the American contract. He had written once, "You have chosen your side." Now he stood in the arrival terminal, holding his hat, watching his daughter walk toward him in an American flight jacket. "Hello, Papa." He looked at the Muroc test pilot patch on her shoulder. His expression was unreadable. "Kurt would have been proud," he finally said. Hannah felt something break inside her chest. Kurt died because of circumstances no one could control. American doctors tried to save him. They used their own supplies, worked overnight, did everything possible. "I know," her father's voice was quiet. "Colonel Patterson sent me copies. After you signed the contract." He reached out tentatively, touched her shoulder. "I was wrong about them, about the Americans. I believed the propaganda because believing it was easier than admitting we had been lied to about everything." They stood in the airport terminal, two people who had survived a war that destroyed millions, trying to find words for reconciliation. "They are good people," Hannah said. "Complicated people. They have their own propaganda, their own blind spots. But they are not the monsters we were taught to fear. And they gave me a chance when they had every reason to hate me." Her father nodded slowly. "What you are doing testing their aircraft, teaching their pilots, it matters." "It is necessary. The next war will not be fought with propaganda and ideology. It will be fought with technology. And the side that advances fastest will be the side that learns from everyone, including former enemies." In 1955, Hannah testified before a congressional committee investigating aviation safety. A senator from Montana leaned forward. "Miss Reich, you served the Nazi regime. You flew Hitler into Berlin in the final days of the war. Why should Americans trust your judgment about our aircraft?" Hannah did not hesitate. "Because I understand what happens when nations stop learning from their enemies. Germany developed swept-wing theory and rocket propulsion, but we were so convinced of our superiority that we did not learn from British radar, innovation, or American manufacturing techniques. That arrogance cost us the war. If you make the same mistake, if you ignore valuable knowledge because of where it comes from, you will lose the next one." The senator leaned back. "That is a remarkably honest answer. It is the only answer that matters. You did not hire me to tell you comfortable lies. You hired me to keep your pilots alive." By 1960, she had tested aircraft that flew faster than sound, aircraft that could reach altitudes where the sky turned black, aircraft that required pressure suits just to keep pilots conscious. She retired from active flying in 1961 at age 49 after her body finally accumulated too many broken bones to safely handle the G-forces. The Air Force offered her a position as technical consultant. She accepted, spending the next decade reviewing aircraft designs, identifying potential failure points, teaching young engineers what 44 crashes had taught her. In 1976, NASA invited her to Houston for a symposium on experimental aviation. She stood at the podium, looking out at faces representing 3 decades of American aerospace advancement astronauts who had flown spacecraft, test pilots who had broken speed records, engineers who had designed aircraft that existed only as mathematics before someone proved they could fly. "I crashed 44 aircraft during my career," she said. "Every single crash taught me something about flight physics, about structural limits, about human factors under extreme stress. But the most important thing I learned had nothing to do with aircraft." She paused, letting the room settle into complete silence. "I learned that knowledge has no nationality. Innovation does not care about ideology, and the future belongs to whoever is willing to learn from everyone, including people they once called enemies. When Colonel Patterson hired me in 1946, he did not see a Nazi. He saw someone who understood things his own pilots did not. That decision, that willingness to look past history and focus on capability saved American lives and advanced American aerospace by decades." The room erupted in applause. After the symposium, a young female engineer approached her, maybe 25. with bright eyes and a NASA badge. Miss Reich, I wanted to thank you. I am working on shuttle development now. Your papers on swept wing stability are required reading for our program. Your research, what you learn from all those crashes, it is helping us design a vehicle that can return from space and land like an aircraft. Hannah looked at this young woman who had grown up in a world where female engineers were not anomalies, where German and American aerospace programs collaborated openly, where learning from former enemies was not controversial but expected. What is your name? Sarah Morrison. My grandfather was your chief engineer at Muroc. He talked about you constantly, said you were the toughest pilot he ever worked with. Hannah smiled, remembering Morrison's patient explanations, his oil-stained hands, his refusal to accept shortcuts. Your grandfather taught me that aircraft do not lie. They tell you exactly what they are doing if you pay attention. Everything I learned because he gave me aircraft honest enough to teach me. Sarah nodded. He said the same thing about you, that you were the most honest pilot he had ever met, honest about your limitations, about what you did not know, about when an aircraft was trying to kill you. She hesitated. Can I ask you something? Do you ever regret it? Working for the Americans after everything that happened? Hannah considered the question carefully. I regret the war. I regret believing propaganda that turned human beings into enemies. I regret that my brother died in circumstances that could have been avoided if people had chosen diplomacy over ideology. She paused. But working for the Americans, testing their aircraft, teaching their pilots, that is the only thing I did after the war that I am certain was right. I took knowledge purchased with German crashes and used it to save American lives. That is not betrayal. That is redemption. Sarah smiled. My grandfather would have agreed with you. Hannah Reich died in 1979 at age 67 in Frankfurt. Not in a crash. In her sleep, her body finally succumbing to decades of accumulated injuries that no amount of stubbornness could overcome. The American test pilot community sent representatives to her funeral, pilots who had flown aircraft she had helped design, engineers who had studied her technical papers, a generation of aerospace professionals who knew her only as a pioneer, not as a former enemy. Jim Chen, now a senior test pilot instructor, gave the eulogy. Hannah taught us that the hardest crashes are not the ones that break your body. They are the ones that break your assumptions. When she came to Muroc in 1946, she carried assumptions about Americans that propaganda had drilled into her. We carried assumptions about her that our own propaganda had created. The real test was not whether she could survive another crash. It was whether we could all survive the impact of our assumptions colliding with reality. He paused, looking out at the assembled mourners, German and American, civilian and military, people who had never met Hannah but knew her work. She passed that test, and by passing it, she taught us how to pass it too. The swept-wing aircraft that revolutionized jet aviation, the Phone 102, the Phone 106, the four Phantom that served for decades, they all carried knowledge that began with Hannah Reich's refusing to stop flying even after 44 crashes. Her technical papers on high-speed stability are still cited in aerospace engineering courses. Her crash survival techniques are still taught at test pilot schools. But her real legacy is not in the aircraft or the papers. It is in the lesson she embodied so completely that even former enemies had to acknowledge it. Sometimes the crash is not the failure. Sometimes the crash is how you learn to fly. Thanks for watching. I hope this astonishing story of risk, skill, and second chances amazed you. Do not forget to like, share, and subscribe for more incredible stories from history.